Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirma Maheti Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. Our topic today is Ramakrishna of the Heart, as we get ready for the puja that we will have next Sunday to celebrate his birthday. According to the lunar calendar, his birthday occurs on actually day after tomorrow, on Tuesday, and we'll celebrate it on Sunday. For most of you, Ramakrishna needs no introduction. His name is inscribed in the name of the society itself. And we know that he was one of the most well-known among the great mystics that were born in the Indian subcontinent. Historically, compared to many of these ancient figures, he is much closer to us. He was born in the year 1836 and passed away 50 years later. Passed away 50 years later in 1886. He was born in an obscure little village north of Calcutta, a village called Kamarpukur, a village most of us would not even have heard of, and we today it's kind of come finds a place on the map because a great personality like Ramakrishna was born there. It's still it still retains a lot of the rural ambience that it was during Ramakrishna's time, although with time things have changed a little bit. Among the things that strikes many of the first readers of Ramakrishna's life was how from a very young age he had these experiences which we today can describe mostly as mystical experiences. The first one was when he was less than 10 years old. In fact, probably even much younger than that. When he was just walking in the fields in the village with some puffed rice in his hand, and there was this dark clouds in the sky, and he saw a line of birds, cranes flying, and just seeing that, he just lost all outward consciousness and remained in that ecstatic state for a long time. And someone so young experiencing that, people sometimes thought whether he's suffering from epileptic fits or something like that. But then when similar things begin to occur at different stages of his life, and the effect it had on him, the transformation it had on him, was not like the kind of effects that we see in epileptic patients. So people knew that this was something. Sorry about this. Just before coming down, I took one of these things that are used for throat relief, and I thought that would make it better. Actually, it was better before I took that. So next time I know what not to take. And so we find that he was a very playful, joyful child. And then at the age of 10, his father passed away. And sometimes we know in our lives when some such events, some of the events that occur in our life can be very transformative. And somehow that is the kind of change they found in this young child. He was barely 9 or 10 years old that time when his father passed away. And then he became much more serious. And shortly after that, his older brother came to Calcutta and brought this youngest brother of his along with him. And there the older brother took up the position of a priest in a Kali temple, and Ramakrishna lived with him. And after some time, when his brother passed away, Ramakrishna became the chief priest in that Kali temple. Oh, so sorry. One of the things that occurred in Ramakrishna's life at that time was a little bit different from most of the priests we might find in other temples. And that is, the puja, the worship that he did in the temple, was not simply a part of his job. He was a employed priest there. He did receive a monthly salary, but to him, never was a job. He did it as something that came from his heart. And in the beginning, while he did hit the worship meticulously, he had not had any experience of the Divine Mother. And so, like most spiritual seekers in the beginning of our journey, he had doubts. He even was skeptical. Like, this worship that I'm doing with so much faith and so much devotion, but it's still, what I see before me is this a carved image in a stone. So the Divine Mother that I'm worshipping, is she really there, or is it just a stone? And if she's really there, why can't I see her? Is she living, or is just something that is just a matter of faith and belief? So he was consumed by that. and he wept and he prayed. And we read in his biography that as evening approached and the sun was about to set, he felt that anguish and he would cry out and say, "Mother, one more day has passed and I have not had your vision." He used to say later on in life, people cry and weep and shed tears for so many things. How many people do that for God? So we have cried in our lives for many reasons. And it's something that we all can ask. How often have tears come in my eyes out of love for God? How often have I felt, yes, everything is going fine in my life. I adore whichever forms of the divine that I have, but I have not had a direct experience. I haven't really seen them, experienced them as palpably, as really, as tangibly as I'm able to experience the rest of the world or the other people around me. But that was a little bit unusual in this young priest's case, that he was pining to see the real mother beyond the image of the mother. And so a point was reached in his life when when months passed and nothing happened. His faith was strong. His desire to see the mother was strong, but there was no vision of the mother. And then we see a very dramatic incident that usually in the image of Ma Kali, you'll have one of the hands she holds a sword. So in that shrine, they had a big sword at the side. He picked up that sword and said, "What's the point? If mother doesn't exist, then why am I just living there?" And at that moment, when he was determined to lay down everything just for the vision of the mother, he had this amazing experience that what was formerly this a stone image, just he saw it just melt into these waves of consciousness, effulgent consciousness, and he was drowned into that. And all that he could utter in that was just ma, ma, mother, mother. And that was the first incident that we know of that he had this direct experience in a very tangible way. And then later on in life, we see more things happening, and most of you have read a lot about those incidents. After some time, in fact, later on, once he had that experience of mother, next time, whenever he would go to worship, he no longer saw the carved image. He just saw a living, breathing mother. In fact, the way he did worship changed dramatically after that. And a lot of people couldn't see because everyone else was just seeing the image. And he was seeing the living mother there. And so when he started speaking with the image and started reacting and all those things, a few people who could understand this ecstatic state were uplifted by what they saw. But many others thought, there's something wrong with him. He's gone crazy. We don't see other priests doing that. It took a while for people to know that there was something very unusual, very different about him. And then a point was reached when he would go on the housetops, the rooftop of the small building where he was staying, and say, where are these pure-souled people? I'm tired of hearing the worldly talk of the people around me. And so he just kind of called out to earnest seekers of truth. And after that, we see one by one, many of them started coming to him. And in fact, among the earliest to come to him were college-going young men. And they afterwards became the first generation of the movement that started with his name. And those are many of those who later on chose the monastic life. We kind of now today know them as direct disciples of Ramakrishna. After that, he made pilgrimage to Benares. He didn't travel a lot, but he went once to Benares, Kashi, and also to Vrindavan. And many of the sites that Ramakrishna visited are still there, and many people who have been to those places have seen his house, where the place where he was born, the house in which he was born, is still there in Kamarpukur, and in the spot where he was born, a beautiful temple today stands. On the other bank of the Ganges, where the Belur Mutt, the main monastery of the order, is there we have a huge temple. The picture you see at the back, right there, that's actually the inside of that big stone temple. And that was designed by a disciple of Ramakrishna, who was an engineer, Swami Vijnanananda. And this design was approved by Swami Vivekananda before his passing. But the temple itself took almost more than 3 decades afterwards. And they couldn't build this. I mean, it was a grand vision, but they couldn't build the temple because they didn't have money. I mean, they were just living that time, the first monastery was in a dilapidated rented house. And they were able to afford it because the house was known to be haunted and no one wanted it. And Vivekananda and the other disciples used to say that we are not afraid of any ghosts. We are holding on to the name of the divine. No ghosts can come and do any harm to us. Anyway, and that's how, and then I'm not going to go through the entire biography. But we know today that this little-known priest from an obscure village, and today now, inspired by his life, inspired by his message, uh, temples and monasteries and places to study have sprung up all over the world. So when we think about people like Ramakrishna, we've got to recognize that when we think about his life and then some of the things that we just saw, they belong to history. That's the historical dimension. As history, it's a study of the past, something that happened. Yes, not too long ago, but still, none of us here has personally met Ramakrishna the way we meet our friends now. And so we get to know about him, hear about him through books and now through some YouTube videos and movies and such things. But it's still a Ramakrishna of history who's separated from us by time and separated from us by space as well. We live on the other side of the globe. He is on the other side. But he and those like him also have this other dimension, the spiritual dimension. So the historical dimension is bound by time and space, and the spiritual dimension is not bound by time and space. And so one of the things that we might see often happening is that when we like someone, when we adore someone, when someone's life inspires us, so we are curious, then the next thing we want to do is to meet them, see them, get close to them. So today, in this 21st century, how are we going to go close to Ramakrishna? The Ramakrishna of history is great, but is still Ramakrishna of history is gone. And of course, for most of us, as I said, our first acquaintance with him comes often through books. And there's a lot of literature available. There are many biographies of his that are available. Then his words have been recorded. So we get to read these books and come to know about Sri Ramakrishna. And while reading books and studying history is an educative experience, we learn a lot, the distance still remains. And so how do we bring it closer? Sometimes through one of the things that can occur through books is, I remember I got to read, there was this Vietnamese Buddhist monk, Thich Nhat Hanh, and many of you may have heard his name. So he has this, one of his best known books is called The Miracle of Mindfulness. And I think I read it somewhere probably in early 90s or so, 1990 or 91. So it's almost like more than 30 years ago. And I loved that book. And if you have not seen it yet, I would strongly recommend that you do read it. It's very helpful. Irrespective of whichever meditative practice you have, the book is very inspiring. It gives us very practical tips about how to prepare ourselves for a meditative state. And then, of course, we can do whatever our personal meditation is. And because this book is about mindfulness, and it's really is useful for anyone from any tradition and irrespective of the practice they do. So I like that book very much, and I hoped, I wonder, and that time Thich Nhat Hanh was still living. He passed away a few years ago. And I was thinking, he lives in France, and I was in southern India, and there was no really realistic chance of me meeting him. And so but the thought came to my mind, how wonderful it would be, now that I like this person, who is this author, if I could meet him. And as luck would have it, probably about 6 years after I first read that book, 6 or 7 years, I came to know he is visiting Madras, Chennai, where I was. So I thought, there is a real chance that I might get to see him. And as it sometimes happens, when actually the day I went to see him, I wanted to see him, but I was also a little bit concerned, because sometimes when you read about someone or a book by someone, you kind of have a kind of a mental image about how that person might be, the kind of person who wrote a book like this. And so my concern was, when I actually go to see him and actually meet him, what if he's so different from the mental image I had in my mind? And so there was a little bit of a mixed feelings there. But when I actually saw him, it was wonderful. It was just as I had imagined an author of that kind of a book would be. And he was very kind, very gracious. He invited me over, and we in fact had lunch together, and he was wonderful. And then that time, he in fact said, "Why don't you come and stay some days with us at his monastery in France?" And that time I had no idea that I'll be going out anywhere outside India anywhere. So I didn't even know I was going to come here. So I just laughed and said, "No, that seems like it won't happen." But I just mention all this to show that something that I read in a book, and here is this person who was separated from me, not by time, he was still living, but by space, because he was so, a completely different country. But when I was able to meet him, that time, of course, but space became much closer. And somehow, not only the author became more real when I had met him, but the next time now I read the book, it reads different, because I'm able to kind of feel the person who I had met. Now that's essentially what has been the back of my mind when I spoke about, when I wanted to call it the Ramakrishna of the heart. That when we read Ramakrishna's books, will he become real to me the way, in this particular one instance, I'm sure we have our own examples about this, when a person becomes real. In fact, I just met Thich Nhat Hanh, but sometimes when the best way of making something real is, at least for little children, is to consume that. I didn't eat Thich Nhat Hanh, but some of you may have heard the name of, it's of a previous generation. So Maurice Sendak was one of the well-known American authors and illustrators for children's books. His book, he became well-known for, I think, probably first published in early 60s, was a book called Where Wild Things Are. And amazing illustrators, very popular. His books sold in thousands and millions. And so he said once that he used to get a lot of fan mail, of course, from little children. And he said he always made it a point to answer, to respond to the letters he got from children. So he said, one letter he got from a boy, he was named Jim, the name of the boy. And so he said the little boy had sent him a card and then drew a little bit illustration. The boy had drawn his own kind of a version of a picture and sent it to Maurice Sendak. And he said, I somehow loved it so much. So he wrote, "Dear Jim, I loved your picture." And then he drew a little picture of one of the wild things and sent it. A few days later, he got a response from the boy's mother. And the mother wrote to the author that Jim was so happy to get your letter that he loved it, he ate it. And the author said that this is the highest compliment I've received in my life. Better than any of the awards that I had got. Because he said it was as simple as that. He got it, he loved it, he ate it. But when we eat something, that is really oneness. Then it's no, you just become one with you. So when we adore someone, these figures in our lives, and especially in spiritual life, it would often take the form of our ishta, our chosen ideal, the object of our highest adoration. How can we eliminate that time gap that separates us from them? How can we eliminate the space that separates us from them? How can we meet them? How can we come closer to them? And how can we kind of eat them in some way? In a sense that there'll be no longer that separation. We just feel completely united with them. So one way, clearly, as I said, is books. But reading of books also, everyone, lots of people read books, but there is a better way to read books. To kind of, even through books, it may be possible to go closer to them, because we can read a book by remaining outside the book, or we can read a book by being inside the book. It's a little bit like when you go to watch a movie, and you can enjoy the movie, but if throughout the movie you remain outside the story that you're seeing, you know you are sitting in your seat with a big bag of popcorn in your hands, so you never forget that you are sitting in a place but enjoying the movie. But the other way of seeing the movie is you just forget where you are. Even if you have popcorns in your hand, you even forget to eat them. You become identified with what's happening on the screen. You become a part of the story yourself. That way that's an immersion. You kind of get immersed in it, and that kind of an enjoyment, that kind of an experience of the movie is very different than simply watching it as an observer. Now, something like that is possible to do even when we read these books. So when you read, say, Kathamrita or the Gospel of Ramakrishna, and it's a diary essentially of the author, it's possible to read the same book and think, oh, this is what Ramakrishna told those people in that place. But it's also possible that when you read that book, and if you have some creative imagination, then you can visualize Ramakrishna's room. It's easy to do because there are photographs available, even if you have not visited it personally. And when you have in the books just being described, Ramakrishna sitting on the bed, and there are these bunch of names are mentioned. We may not know much about most of those names. These are the people sitting in his room, and nothing stops you. Every time you read a list of names like that, just kind of add your name there and see yourself sitting in that room as well. Now, it's a whole different experience, because then when you read Ramakrishna's words, you no longer see them as this is what he told them. Now you are in the room yourself, so you know this is what he's telling me. That's where a study, adhyayana, becomes swadhyaya when the swa gets attached to it, when the self is put there. And so that way of studying, that way of reading might be spiritually more beneficial to us. That you read the books of the words of Holy Mother, you read Vivekananda's complete works. Just imagine that this is what he is telling you. This is what he is telling me when I'm the reader. When we think like that, then a little bit we bring these figures of history and bring them to the present. Because now we are present there and we are still here. So time and space in some way can be overcome by putting ourselves in that text. A second way, a Ramakrishna of the past can become Ramakrishna of the present. One way, as I said, is about how we read these books. A second way occurs when any of these teachings of Ramakrishna resonate with us, make sense to us, then we need not stop by simply appreciating it. Oh, how great he was, or how wonderful he was. Well, that's fine. He might be very wonderful. But still, I just remain still who I am. But if I see that, yes, this is what he said makes sense, and I somehow try to embody that teaching in my own life, I somehow try to practice it in my own little way. It may be very imperfect, but I'm making an effort to live. For instance, we read in Ramakrishna's teachings again and again, God alone is real. Everything else is temporary. Everything else is anitya. Everything else is transitory. Everything is changing. The only unchanging being is God. Now, it's not enough to kind of just nod at this intellectually and say, oh yeah, that makes sense. No, it has to be more than that. Now, if I then try to remind myself that among all the changes that are occurring outside and within me, the one unchanging being is God. The one unchanging reality is the divine, the ideal. The more I remind myself of that, I'll begin to see some change in me. Now that transformation, however little it may be, that transformation is not occurring 150 years ago. That transformation is not occurring in Kamarpukur. That change in my heart is occurring right now in the 21st century. It's occurring where I am right now. So one way that time and space can be overcome, if we try to not just intellectually appreciate what Ramakrishna said, but try to live according to it. Ramakrishna spoke about, and actually practiced in his life, that showing and confirming that every way of praying, meditating, every religious tradition is a valid path to reaching that ultimate reality. That's a great vision. It's not invented by Ramakrishna. This has been there in the tradition for centuries, but he reconfirmed it through his own experience. And then we might like to look at our own lives and say, this diversity that we encounter in our lives every time, how often do we remember that no, all of these different paths are valid paths to the same reality? That God is one, but the way of praying, the way of worshipping, the way of doing things could be many different. And each way is equally effective. If I can live with that conviction, and that living with that conviction means it would reflect in the way I deal with the diversity that I encounter around me. When I am able to do that, then the changes that occur within me bring Ramakrishna into the present. He's no more the Ramakrishna of the past, he becomes a Ramakrishna of the present. And of course, when we look out and look at the lives of other people around us who may be inspired by Ramakrishna or the Vedanta Society, for instance, where we find that his teachings, his light, his inspiration guides these organizations which are doing so much good and benefiting so many people in different parts of the world. So looking at the changes that are occurring outside and the changes that are occurring in our own heart, Ramakrishna of the past becomes Ramakrishna of the present. Now, Ramakrishna of the present is good, but can we, just like Jim did, just ate up that letter? The Ramakrishna of the present who is here now, can we just now eat him up, if you like? And that would be when Ramakrishna enters inside. When it's not just the Ramakrishna of the present, he becomes the Ramakrishna of the now, of this moment. And that happens in prayer. That happens in meditation. That is the time to close your books. That is the time to switch off our computers, our television sets, our cell phones, if possible. It's difficult, but if possible, if you can switch all that off and then look in the heart, that is where we will find Ramakrishna of the now, when there is no distinction at all. That's our spiritual way of eating him up. The word that gets used in our evening Vesper songs, composed by Vivekananda, though there is an adjective called Chidghana Kai. So it describes Ramakrishna as Kaya, it's a Bengali hymn, and Kaya in Sanskrit also means a body. Chit is consciousness. Ghana means kind of a concentrated consciousness. And the idea is, yes, consciousness is infinite, without boundaries, it's one and infinite. But a devotee says, if this pure consciousness, if it were to be concentrated and brought together, and what form it will take, that would be the form of my chosen deity. That would be the form of my Ishta. So when we visualize our chosen deity in the heart, and those who meditate on Ramakrishna will visualize Ramakrishna in the heart, this image is very helpful. That we are not expected to visualize a photograph. A photograph is helpful because we no longer have to depend purely on imagination of how he looked. Today, at least, a photograph helps us have some idea about his form. But when we meditate, when we try to visualize, we are not going to visualize a photograph. We are not going to visualize a marble image. Because if you visualize the photograph, you will realize the photograph. But we don't want a photograph realization. We want God realization. So what we want is seeing Ramakrishna. So a photograph, and the example, clear, obvious example would be, suppose someone loves eating mangoes or apple, which is kind of more easily available now. So if we love eating apple, and if someone gives me a great picture of an apple, or if you're wearing Apple Vision Pro, you can get a 3D picture of an apple. It looks very real. But yet, it reminds you of the apple. You can't eat it. No matter how good that Vision Pro is, you can just move your hand. You can't grasp it. But if you want to eat it, you'll need a real apple. Exactly in the same way, no matter how good a photograph of Ramakrishna we might have, or whichever way, representation, an image or whatever, it's still not real. And so when we meditate, when we visualize a real, living, breathing, shining, effulgent Ramakrishna in the heart. Now we know, it's not that every day we keep on making these efforts. It may not be possible in the beginning that every day we are going to have an absolutely perfect meditation. That's fine. All that we need is a lot of patience and perseverance and the determination never to give up. And someone who never gives up, someone who is patient, someone who is perseverant, and with that great heart filled with love, if you try to visualize him, one day it'll happen. We will see him. And that would not be a form, that will not be a picture, that will not be some idea you read about in some books. It'll be Ramakrishna himself. At that moment, time comes to a complete stop. That time, you're not even thinking about spatial difference or distance. You're not even thinking about time. Everything becomes standstill. That's the Ramakrishna of the heart. And as I have pointed out oftentimes, that one of the first things that occurs for every meditator is discovering the heart itself. It's not the physiological heart. There is no place for anybody to stay there. It's just filled with blood and lots of things. But there is emotional heart also. Heart, because we use the word heart even as the seat of emotions. But beyond the physiological heart, beyond the emotional heart, is the spiritual heart. So oftentimes in the beginning, when we try to close our eyes, and we are of course oftentimes asked to visualize the Ishta in the heart, it's very difficult in the beginning to kind of stabilize whatever it is that we are trying to visualize, whatever it is that we are trying to imagine, because we haven't yet even identified the location. All that we know is it is in this area. It's a little bit like if someone wants to visit our Vedanta Center and they have never been here, maybe they are visiting Boston for the first time, and then someone says, "Where is it?" "Oh, it's in the Kenmore Square area. It's near Fenway." So they know they don't have to go to Lowell searching for it. They don't have to go. They know the general area. So they will come in this area, and of course in the beginning there's the one-way streets, etc. People do kind of have to go around a little bit. But once then they find the place, then when they come a second time, a third time, they know exactly where to go. In the beginning, it's a little bit like that. When you're asked to meditate on the divine in the heart, so we kind of know this is the Kenmore Square here somewhere. And in the beginning, we're like, fine, where is it? Where is it? I'm not able to find it. And then finally we'll find, oh, this is that 58 Deerfield Street. Once we find that, then the next time we sit, we don't have to go on searching anymore. Then we know exactly where to go. That's why in the early stages, meditation can be difficult. Difficult in the sense, it's almost like feeling our way through a dark tunnel. And that's why we need patience. Because sometimes people might try for a while and say, "Oh no, nothing," or "It's not for me," or "This doesn't work, let me try something else." And some people do that. But if someone says no, and that's where faith is essential in the beginning. Faith is what leads us to that experience. And once we get that experience, we no longer need that much faith because we have actually directly seen it. And therefore, until that experience comes, one who practices prayer, worship, meditation, have to keep on doing it, even if they don't experience anything immediately. It's our faith, our love, our devotion that will keep us focused there. But with that earnestness when we do it, one day, what starts out as imagination becomes a reality. Because we are not imagining the imaginary, we are imagining the real. If I'm imagining the imaginary, it's never going to be real because it's imagined. But if I know something is real, I have not experienced it, so I'm trying to imagine it. So imagining the real will ultimately take me to that reality. But imagining the imaginary, no matter how much you imagine Harry Potter, chances are you won't meet him. You can still enjoy the books, but you won't meet him because it's still imaginary. But imagining Ramakrishna, one day we will meet him because he is not only there 100 years ago in Kamarpukur in a different part of the globe, he is here with us now. So that's essentially something that is worth remembering as we get ready for his worship next Sunday. That Ramakrishna of the history can become Ramakrishna of the present. And Ramakrishna of the present can become Ramakrishna of the now. Ramakrishna of history will educate us. The Ramakrishna of the present can inspire us. But it's only Ramakrishna of the now, the Ramakrishna of the heart, that can free us from samsara. It's the Ramakrishna of the heart who can give us moksha. So, spiritual life has to be something more than just reading books. It has to be something more than just discussing and analyzing every detail. And that more is really takes us back to the heart. And all these three are connected. Ramakrishna of history, Ramakrishna of the present, and Ramakrishna of the heart are connected. And usually, that's how the journey is. One leads to the other. We begin with books. We begin to then somehow becomes more real in our lives. We see it manifested outside of us. And then when we meditate, it becomes even more real. So, those are some of the thoughts I wanted to share with you this morning about Ramakrishna of the heart. And everything that I said is equally applicable, irrespective of whichever is the focus of our adoration. Could be Buddha, could be Jesus, could be any of these great illuminaries, those who continue to show the path to generations of seekers all over the world. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu.